It's taken 7 weeks, but Bitcoin's at a new all-time high price, eclipsing the previous high by just $150 before closing underneath that high. Now, the slow grind to the upside with low sentiment and low volume seems to be favoring the bulls. However, we will need to see further drive from retail and more interest come through to the market if we're going to sustain any significant move to the upside, as we'll check with the altcoin markets in just a moment. Heaps to get through with you, along with Bitcoin, the sentiment, stock markets resetting, economic data as we've seen more money getting printed in the last 24 hours, debts, leverage positions, but then understanding those from a percentage perspective relative to where the current environment sits with retail traders and that money in the system. And of course, another big one in the last 24 hours, AI, with Nvidia hitting a new, fresh, all-time high price and being the most valued company in history, this time hitting $4 trillion, the first company also to do that in history. So hit the like, subscribe to the channel if you are new here. 1 in 4 of you still haven't subscribed to Home and Macro Cycle Analysis, but more importantly, we continue to follow the 18-year cycle into this winner's curse phase and potential peak and collapse. So lots to get through in today's video. Bitcoin, new all-time high price. We've got lots of data to get through there. Just taking a quick step back in time, looking at the lows of 2022. This was back when it was a very unpopular opinion, December 22, so basically 2.5 years ago. At the time, I was looking at S&P 500 is bottoming, not crashing. And of course, we're seeing new, fresh, all-time high prices in mid-2025 now. Real estate not going to crash in 2023. These were forecasts for 2023, and I did the same thing in 2023 for 2024, and I did the same thing again in 2024 for 2025 over on X. For second half of 2022 and the first half of 2023, so essentially this period here, is a buying opportunity. Bitcoin is bottoming. Most cryptos are terrible DCA investments. That's most, not all, but most of them. Obviously, there's over 2 million, so a bit of a throwaway line, but let's just say Bitcoin, stock markets, real estate have all continued up from that time when it was an extremely unpopular opinion to suggest that markets could go up from those lows. Fast forward to today, we find ourselves hitting a new fresh all-time high, but people just seem disinterested in the markets overall, which leads me to think that we probably still have more time to get to these highs, because we've seen it before. For the markets to reach some sort of extreme peak, the interest, the sentiment has to be in extreme greed. We saw it here in March 2024, we saw it in December and November 2024, and then one final peak here in January when Trump was inaugurated in 2025. Both of those times for this cycle led to 30+% corrections, but we not necessarily have seen that now. We haven't seen that extreme greed. And the only real greed we saw was coming out of the tariff crash low in April, which then led to increased volume buying on those Bitcoin ETFs. But that was midway through the move to the upside. And so from that point, roughly $75,000, Bitcoin has put on 50% in that time. And so now we see a bit of a slow grind here at higher prices, which generally, and we're just going with the probabilities, generally suggests that there is a lot further to go to the upside. Doesn't mean it has to happen today or tomorrow. Of course, we have seen a new all-time high of just $150 over the previous high. But overall, because we haven't seen that extreme sort of greed from the previous highs and the support levels keep getting higher, it would lead one to believe, based on the probabilities, that this is just a nice slow grind higher until we do get to that time when I guess a lot of retail comes back and even more businesses get FOMO to start creating their own sort of funds, like what MicroStrategy has done. That could be part of how this blow off top continues to form here for Bitcoin. So will it have any sort of effect for altcoins? Now, our daily videos cover many detailed charts, data, indicators, and our forte, the cycle analysis, to help guide us through the investment cycle. So if you're a brand new subscriber to the channel, then I highly encourage you to get our weekly reports on Bitcoin, altcoins, and the economy, including the real estate cycle. They're easy to read in under 5 minutes each, making them extremely digestible for all investor levels. There are 3 reports coming your way starting your week from Tuesday. It'll get you up to speed on how we forecast the markets and how we've been able to profit during uncertain times leading into and out of the cycle peak. It's completely free, so subscribe today using the link in the top of the video description and you'll receive your first report shortly. So looking at all the money piling into the system, there is now another $360 billion going into the debt, the total public debt here in the US, nearly at $37 trillion as well. A lot of these big numbers get thrown around a lot just to seem a little bit scary, like it's unmanageable. Eventually it will be, but this has been going on for decades upon decades upon decades, literally multiple decades. You have to go back to the 70s, this sort of thing has been going on. Cumulative net retail purchases of a single stock leveraged ETF. So they're getting one stock, it's leveraged, so it's a leveraged product with an ETF, is at its highest level in the last 3 years. Obviously, 2022 was a bear market, as I showed in the intro, and a lot of people didn't believe that there was much more to do on the upside. But we're beginning to see there is a lot of excitement coming into the stock market space. There is extreme greed again over the last few days. We've seen greed and extreme greed as it broke into new fresh highs. But we are also seeing more money come into the system. So when we put this into perspective, doesn't necessarily mean just because there is more money and the dollars are hitting new fresh high prices, in the case here of single stock leverage products, doesn't mean that it's time to collapse. So putting it into perspective, US household leverage as a percentage is at a 50-year low. This is where it sits here. Look at this, 12%. So somewhere around these 70s. Now, of course, there was a recession here and then a recession here and then another one here in the 90s. So I'm pointing to the mid 70s, early 80s, early 90s, and so on. Some of the more recent histories there. But in terms of a US household leverage, so this is a ratio of liabilities to net wealth. So it's still at relatively low prices. And as silly as it sounds, things can still go a lot further. Even with interest rates where they sit, the market is getting used to where these interest rates are currently sitting. You can see this with the interest rates, historically low levels, underneath roughly 6%. You'd have to go back decades upon decades. In the 80s is where it really sat above 6%. Under 6% is still historically low, and the markets can cope with this. We also see unemployment at historically low levels. Underneath 5% is generally said to be full employment, and it's at 4.1%. So historically low levels. This often gets pointed to with the unemployment rising. If you take a look back in 2023, it was at 3.5%, which you'd have to go back to 1968. Just getting my numbers right, because that is over 50 years ago to see unemployment that low. And from there, yes, it rose, but also the stock markets went up slightly, but it was still on the up for the end of the cycle. Looking at the real estate cycle here into those peaks, roughly 1972 into about 1974, we saw those peaks there before the correction came in. So that was the collapse for the end of the previous cycle. Possibly, if you're here for Bitcoin, you're probably wondering what the hell has this all got to do with Bitcoin? We're trying to decipher, is there more left in the tank? There seems to be a lot more left in the tank, even though we're getting closer to the end of this cycle. And there could be still a few reasons why the markets would collapse after this point, but those pieces haven't necessarily broken. We are beginning to see it across the globe. Like in the case of the US, their bonds continue to rise, their yields were rising. And in Japan, the same thing is going on again. Japan's long-term government bond yields are trading near record highs. And some might think that that's all part of another narrative as to why, again, Bitcoin needs to go up. It's the only safe place to be putting their money. Whatever the narrative is will depend on the person and which one they believe is most important at this current time of the cycle. And that's why I bring up a few different reasons why the markets could be going up in the case here of Bitcoin. Some would believe there's nowhere else to put your money. Others believe it's because of the dollars rising into the system. Whatever the case is, go back to the price chart, make it nice and simple, and the prices have continued to rise over this entire cycle, going back to the lows of 2022 when we talked about it here on the channel. We don't know exactly where the low is going to be. We don't know exactly where the top is going to be. No one does. We know no one rings a bell and tells you the exact date and time, and you should sell absolutely everything on that day. It seems relatively easy in theory, but at the time we're just looking for a change in trend, and it seemed like there was a change in trend occurring late 22, early 2023, and of course here we are. And I don't think we've got to the next change in trend where the top has formed. But as I continue to cover on the channel, there are reasons to believe that we are beginning to approach those areas, especially for the end of the cycle, which lasts roughly 14 years up and 4 years down. So that's the big one ahead. The stock markets are also trading near highs. My other theory on the stock markets is when we see clear skies ahead, we've seen it before with the S&P 500 racing to new fresh highs. Bitcoin also follows suit. In the case of the S&P 500, you can see the white line in the background is Bitcoin, and the S&P 500 in the candles. The white boxes are the times where the S&P has had a relatively clear run into those highs, and Bitcoin has basically followed suit with that final leg of its own bull market. This bull market, we've had a couple of attempts at new all-time highs. We had the tariff crash in the middle, and now we are at both the S&P, the NASDAQ, and Bitcoin. I was talking about the SP and Bitcoin at new fresh all-time highs. So this theory has continued to carry on for this cycle as it has done in the previous 3 cycles. So we're now into the 4th cycle here. Still see further upside for the S&P. I suspect I'd still see further upside for Bitcoin as well. NASDAQ is also trading at fresh highs almost. There it is, dead on, a new fresh all-time high price. A second highest close in history. And this would be off the back of the AI narrative. So as a side note for you guys watching, if you've been following for some time, we typically get big narratives towards the peaks, narratives that cause people and investors to believe that this time is different. AI definitely sounds like this time is different. I suspect if we don't get anything bigger in the meantime, that could be one of the big things that leads into the peak, where a lot of investors, retail, Wall Street, smart money, dumb money, would begin to believe that it's different this time and it's unprecedented and the markets can't go down, essentially flooding the markets with more of that money that we see on the sidelines and see continuing to get printed. That was a side note. Like more of that, obviously hit the like button. But in terms of the pattern that we've been tracking now for the last several months, going back to April, so 3 months here, this one here is the 5-year pattern, the red line in the background. It still suggests a ridiculous run to the upside here. Looking at the NASDAQ, 28,000 points. Now, I have put out some forecasts with price ranges for the stock markets. I talked about those in a previous video recently here. This video, forecasting the future in 2025, recapping all of the forecasts for 2025 that I put out 2nd of January 2025, and looking at how this is going and what I think is happening in the next 6 months. So far, things have continued to carry on. We've continued to see higher prices. And for the S&P 500, potentially we've got more room to go there up towards that sort of 6,700 point level. I'm saying maybe by around the end of the month, but I think by the end of this cycle, at least, we should see around 67. And I did put these out back here when it was sitting at around 6,000 points. So onto the stocks and how this is all playing out to the end before I get onto some cryptos. MicroStrategy has continued to remain stronger than it has in previous cycles. So I was looking at this over the last several months as a potentially indicator towards the end of the cycle. Last cycle, it took about 9 months from its all-time high to the lower high when Bitcoin put in a new all-time high. That date, should it follow suit to last cycle, would come out somewhere around late August of this year, which doesn't give us much time, basically 5 to 6 weeks until the end from today's date. But it has been sitting in MicroStrategy has been sitting in a stronger position. It's above both 50%. So 50% of the bull market and the 50% of the decline, which is this red line that you can see on the side here, coming in around $387. Previous cycle, around this stage of the move, it was sitting underneath the 50% of the bull market move and underneath 50% of the correction. So that would lead me to think there is a much better chance that MicroStrategy could test a new all-time high. $445 is a level to get above. That's the next big test. But if it does hit that, then we could see another blow-off move here for MicroStrategy leading into the end of this peak. That one's going to be really interesting to follow up. You're also seeing new fresh prices for Coinbase, more money, more fees, probably going to continue to follow on, which is what the investors are looking at, looking forward for those next earning reports, not waiting for the earning reports, which a lot of people believe. And as I showed in the intro, NVIDIA hitting a new fresh all-time high price and touching 4 trillion for a moment there, along with Microsoft. So all these things together still seem like there is more fuel left in the tank. 7-year resistance line here. It's winding up again, which I like the look of. Would like to see a little bit more time here to consolidate to then get that breakout of the resistance level. Generally, what I've seen from markets, once they can get through these very long-term resistance levels, and the word is if they can get through them, then we should see some pretty big moves to the upside should they hold them for the macro close. So we'll be looking for a monthly close above that level to see if it can keep carrying on. If it tests it like a wick to the upside and then closes underneath it, that's going to be a weaker sign. You can see it happened back in 2021. April was the high. The market tested it a couple of times. You had October and November, but it did not close above that level. So that signals to the smart money that there's probably a bit of weakness forming into the market. Probably a good idea to start getting out because the price could not sustain above the previous highs. Now, the thing that's getting everyone excited, or at least the altcoin degenerates, is the Bitcoin dominance. So I have the Bitcoin dominance here in the colored candles in the background. This is using the TIA dominance. The difference here is that it excludes the stable coins, so you're going to get a different reading on the percentage here. The current percentage is about 69%, 69.5, which has come down from a high of 70.5%. So that's about a 2% drop. These are the two big areas that got everyone excited, and they lasted a few weeks and a couple of months. This one is the May drop of the dominance, which led to an altcoin mini season. And I guess while the market was falling, the dominance was falling, the altcoins were rising. By the time many were on the bandwagon, it had basically ended because it was only a few weeks there. Same sort of thing happened in November through to December. There's several weeks there. This was the dominance falling from 65% down to 58%. So about a 7% drop in dominance. So we've got 7% here. We have about a 4% here, currently sitting at about a 2% drop. So unless these drops now in dominance, which generally suggests it will flow out into altcoins, because I've removed the stable coins from this. So really the only place the money can go is altcoins or back into fiat, because this doesn't include the stable coins, is this move has to exceed the previous moves to get a larger altcoin season than what we've currently seen. So we're currently halfway in terms of the move that we saw in May 2025, the dominance dropping. Is that possible? I don't know yet because, and I don't think so, my answer would be no until certain criteria are met. One of them is, of course, exchange volume. It's still trading around 30 billion. This is for the 8th. Today just ticked over to the 10th here. So we've seen the day for the 9th. We'll see tomorrow whether we do get an uptick here, but we really do need to see a breakout of these highs at around 40 billion. The last time we saw 29 to 30 billion in volume was back at the consolidation for Bitcoin in August, this period right here. So that was a time where we saw $30 billion, and it took several weeks to climb out of this area before it got into November and broke out with increased volume. That's what this is right here. So we need to see that fire, that gas onto the fire to get those prices running hotter. That happened in November. Then you saw pullbacks. There was a lot of trading going on. December peaked, and then you had this one final boom in January, which was a lower high, which then led to the decline. And that's taken quite a lot of time since the extreme peak, extreme greed sentiment was tops around November, December. We're now July, so basically 7 to 8 months later, and we really haven't seen that volume come back. But it doesn't seem like it's the worst case for Bitcoin, as I talked about earlier in the video, with the slow grind to the upside. So go back and watch that part in the video. Otherwise, we need to see some breakouts of $41 billion at least to begin the change in trend for the volume to come back into the markets. Now, for the total liquidations, we have hit $500 million, taking out, you guessed it, the shorts, one of their largest days since May 8th. So the shorts got absolutely annihilated that day, nearly $1 billion of liquidations. Today, we've seen nearly $500 million of shorts get liquidated. So the leverage, again, getting flushed out of the system. We're still climbing higher. So it doesn't seem like we're ready to roll over, at least for Bitcoin. But the question that is on a lot of people's minds are we going to see an altcoin season? Another metric that I think needs to be met is an overbalance in time and price for the others chart. So the dominance of the altcoins minus the top 10. And we haven't seen that yet. We've seen a few days up, barely even touched the 7.3%, which is what happened on June 24th, so a couple of days up, and since then it's basically been sliding down. Now, the overbalance means that we would need to see a larger move to the upside than what we saw in May 2025. That move was about 1.22, so that's from the low at 7.6 up to the high here at 8.8. It needs to be bigger than that to tell us, to signal to us early on that there is going to be more investors coming back to play the game of trading shitcoins. And so that hasn't happened yet. It's going to come somewhere around 8 to 8.1%. So yes, altcoins can go up. Well, they have to go up leading into this top, but unless it extends from what it did last time, it's probably likely going to fade out again. And you can see how that happened here, literally just back in May. Again, from this low in November to the top in December. That move to the upside was not bigger than June into December 2023. And therefore, less people were playing the altcoin game. Therefore, it led to a decline. And then you saw this small one. Less people again playing the altcoin game led to a decline. So if you get a lesser move to the upside, it generally means that less people are playing the altcoin game. And the probabilities, like it is shown here, which is fact, and we've used overbalance in time and price for many years on the channel, looking at how things can turn, change in trend. In particular, we did it with Bitcoin. There's my chart at those lows back in 2022, 2023, looking at the overbalance in time and price there. The same thing applies to all these markets because it's just charting people's emotions and what people are actually doing in the market as opposed to what they talk about. And we hear a lot of talk out there. So if this move can't at least overbalance the previous move, unlikely it's going to keep going. If it is able to overbalance the previous move in May, then we look to the next biggest one here. The next biggest one was roughly November, December. So hopefully if that's the case, at least for the altcoins, you get the move up to 8.1%, and it keeps going and takes on this move right here. The chance of the alt season low to the high. Where's the top? Roughly around there. So 3.7 off the low would take you somewhere around 10.5%. That could be big things for altcoins, which we would expect to show up in the USDT dominance. So the dominance is at 4.66, having a nice drop today. Still sitting on the overall all-time support line. So it is working in our favor at the moment. We're seeing Bitcoin go up. We're seeing some of the larger alts go up. Ideally, you see this thing continue to fall. 4.4% is the next key level. So that's two of the big ones there. Others, dominance getting above 8.1%, and the USDT dominance finally breaking 4.4%. So two big things there, I think, to get met before we would see a really big move for altcoins. In the meantime, some of the larger, stronger ones, which are showing some strength here, ETH has put in one of its highest closes since its test and failure back in June. So that was the test above 27, just falling short of 2,900. But we're here again after a nice pullback dead on to the 50% level. So that was the move low to high, slice it right through the middle. That day came out dead on the 50%. So know your 50% levels, know how to use them. Really important stuff here for longer term and short term trading. The strength here is looking relatively good. 2,900, we go for it again. That's still my key level for the market for ETH to get above for this next move up into the mid 3,000 levels. XRP is finally taken out $2.30 after multiple times, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 6, as many times as tried at 230. And the next key level is the 50% at about $2.50. So that's looking relatively good as well. SUI also holding above its bull market 50% level. That's $2.90, looking towards $3.30 for that next 50%. Overall, the main one I'm following here, I know there are a lot of 50%, is the bull market 50%. So it's continued to consolidate, putting in higher lows. That's a good sign here. For Sol, 151 from memory, yes, was the bull market 50%. It's holding here for now. The key level for me is around 180. That was the time where it's come in, tested it, failed, tested it, broke, held it, and then failed again. So 180 is a pretty important level here for Sol to get above, consolidate, if it's going to make room to that next new all-time high. And that's a good look at the altcoins for today's video. Hit the like, subscribe to the channel. Lots of good things going on here. There are some positive signs for the altcoins, but at least from my experience, I don't want to get too excited unless several of those metrics are met. Bitcoin dominance needs to overbalance. USDT dominance needs to break down. And the others chart also needs to show that there is more money coming into the system, into the altcoin space, until we see a significant alt season. And my significant alt season I've covered before, looking at pretty big moves to the upside. Lots and lots of money coming into that space. Thanks again, guys. I'll see you back here at the next one. Till then, take care and peace out.